What's up, guys? Danny back again with Caffeine and Cash Practices. Talking today about, do cash practices work in smaller towns? Now, this comes from a conversation we had with someone on our team about questions he gets whenever people call us for advice and want to get some help with their practice. And one of the more common questions we get is, hey, will this work in a town of this size? This is my town, X whatever, in this state. Would that work? And I would say that my philosophy on this, or my opinion, has changed some over the last 5 years in particular, because I used to think that a cash practice in a smaller town really wouldn't work. But over the last 5 years in particular, we've had the opportunity to work with many clinicians in smaller towns, as small as even 10,000 people, that we see do really well. And I'll talk about some of the pros and cons of a bigger town and a smaller town, but I think the misconception is you have to be in San Francisco, New York, LA, Atlanta, millions of people for a cash practice to work. And also you have to be in the most affluent area in that city. And that's just not true. What I see is the, demographic areas that seem to do the best. I mean, for sure, if you're in more an affluent area, you're going to have more people with disposable income. So that does make sense. And I would say that probably is going to work better in some ways. But I think that if you look at education level, that actually is a really important metric to look at as well, because we're talking about people that are informed consumers that are looking for the kind of services that we provide. Also, if you look at areas where there are a lot of kids, or there's people with families, that's also a pretty good demographic area to be in, because you're going to work with people that are, they are probably active adults themselves, and or they have kids that are youth athletes, and the two together work really well to support one of these businesses. And a lot of it depends on your niche as well. So those are a couple of things to think about whenever you're looking at your area. It's not necessarily just how much do people make in this area. I like to look at what's the education level, and then also, is this a family area? What are the schools like? That'll tell you a lot about the area that you're in. Now, if we're looking at pure size, there are some distinct pros and cons to small markets versus bigger markets. Now, I'm gonna kind of break these up into 3 different chunks. So there's really small towns, there's what I call like sweet spot towns, and then there's big towns. So small towns for me, I consider under 50,000 people. So if you're in a city, or maybe not even just a city, but look at your surrounding area. Anything within maybe 20 minutes of you, if there's multiple towns that are close to each other, and the combined area, it sort of increases the population, I would look for that. If you're in an area where there's like 1,000 people, that's gonna be tough. And there was a guy that I taught with whenever I was teaching for Mobility Wad. Amazing chiropractor, was in a small town in Iowa, and his practice, he just really, you couldn't grow it probably the way that he wanted to, because there were only a couple hundred people in his town. And even in the surrounding area, there weren't a ton of people either. It didn't really add up to a lot of folks. Not a lot of people you can help. Not a lot of people that are going to have the niche that maybe you want to focus on. So, in that example, I don't think you're going to be able to see a whole lot of success with this type of a business. Now, if you're in an area where, let's say your town maybe is 10,000 people, but the surrounding towns around you, each of them has maybe another 10,000, and together that's like 30,000 people, you can definitely make that work. We had a practice that we worked with in a rural area of Tennessee. The combined area around this person, I think, was 15,000 people, and he was able to grow cash practice past himself to hire another clinician within, I think it was by year 2, he was able to hire a clinician, have a standalone space, and really grow his business pretty fast in a relatively small area. We've seen a lot of people in areas that are around 50,000 people do really well. And you got to keep in mind, it's not just that there's not as many people there, but you're still dealing with the same problems people are dealing with in bigger areas too. Insurance deductibles are going up. People have more skin in the game when it comes to paying for services. They're more aware of that. They have more skin in the game. They know that. They're looking for these additional, these providers that are different than the traditional approach, where they're going to get more actual one-on-one work. And they value those dollars more because they know that they're going to have to pay for them themselves. So definitely a small town can work. Now, you also have these, what I call kind of sweet spot towns. That'd be what I consider anywhere between like 50,000 and up to potentially maybe even like 1 million people. So these aren't massive cities. These are smaller cities that are still, I mean, relatively populated. If you look at a place that's got a couple 100,000 people, you can absolutely make a cash practice work there. Many cash practices would work and be able to function and thrive in a city of that size. And what I actually really like about these, and the reason I call these sweet spot towns, is normally there is increased level of income. There's people that are active and looking for services like what you provide. There's also far less competition. So there's far fewer people that are amazing clinicians that are opening their own space and will be direct competition for you. So if you can take a world-class clinician and put them into a mid-sized town like this, they actually, from what I've seen, tend to grow the fastest because they have less competition and there's less overhead. So the cost of living, the cost of your facility, your overhead, the cost of your staff, like what you have to pay for salaries, is even going to be lower because cost of living is lower in this area. But yet, the cool part, and the reason I call these sweet spots, is what you can charge per visit is relatively similar to what people can charge in really big cities that are far more costly. So what you can charge in like a Memphis, Tennessee, and what you can charge in Los Angeles is going to be pretty similar. Yet the cost of living and the cost of getting a provider and being able to pay them what would be equivalent from a cost of living standpoint in Memphis is far lower than it is in LA or San Francisco. So these are reasons that I really like these size towns, and I think they do really well. You can definitely scale past yourself. You can scale to multiple locations. You can scale to a big central standalone space, or you can have multiple sort of satellite offices off that. Depends what you want to do, but plenty of room to expand, plenty of people to work with. And if you really are like world class at what you're doing, people are going to figure that out pretty fast. It's kind of like if everybody in your area, if all the restaurants are just mediocre and then somebody comes in that's an absolute killer that knows what they're doing and their food is amazing, that place is going to be slammed because they're not used to seeing something like that there. You go to Manhattan, and that's every corner has a restaurant like that. So the level of competition is a lot higher there. Now, if we go to big towns, which would be the third area or the third type, these big towns, what's nice about these big towns is there's a ton of people to work with. There's a ton of people to work with. They're usually very time sensitive. So they value their time a lot. They want speed, they want expertise, they want people that are gonna help them solve a problem and not waste their time trying to figure it out. This is a huge selling point for people in these types of cities. The other thing in these areas is the acquisition of talent. Like you finding somebody to work in these areas, much easier than if you're in a more rural area. I think the actual ability to find really quality people in a more rural area is hard unless you're sort of building these people organically yourself, or it's people that are from that area that are trying to come back. If you're in a super small town and you're trying to get somebody from another state or something that doesn't know anything about it, or like, why would they want to live there? There's no real reason. Versus if somebody's like, oh yeah, I would move to Denver to take this job at this clinic because they think Denver's cool and they want to be there, right? So the acquisition of talent is far easier in these bigger towns. So you can scale through people much better. Now, the negative would be those people are going to cost you a lot more money. I would say, just even looking at contracts we see in LA and in DC, we've seen base salaries for cash-based clinic staff clinicians be as high as $85,000, $90,000, maybe even a little bit higher in certain niches, just as a base salary in those areas, with the opportunity to have compensation with bonuses stacked on top of that. Now, you take that to a smaller area, that's going to be maybe a couple 100,000 people, and it's going to cost you a lot less than that. Even in Atlanta, it's going to be a good bit less than that because it's a big city, but it's in the southeast, and it's more of a lower cost of living environment. So these are things to keep in mind as you're asking yourself, well, should I move here to start a practice? Should I do this? Should I open it here? I think you can make these work. in almost any area, aside from ultra tiny towns, right? I would say under probably 5,000-10,000 people. Even in the 10,000 range though, you could definitely build a lifestyle business where it's you and your schedule is busy and you're seeing people and you don't have to work for someone else. So that's very possible. I think scaling to where you have a whole bunch of providers and really big business, that's probably less likely. But doesn't really have to be that way, and that may not be what everybody wants. That may not be your goal. You might just want to be able to have a small practice and just work with people, and you can totally do that, no doubt. And if you want to scale in a really big facility, I think these sweet spot towns are great. The overhead is less. You can buy a building easier than you can in San Francisco or whatever. It's very hard. So there's some unique benefits to it. I really do like these mid-sized towns a lot. So if you're thinking about doing this, don't let the size of your town scare you away. If you think that there's just not enough people, there's probably more than enough people, and more than enough people for multiple providers. This is the other thing that we see is, oh, somebody's already started a cash practice in my town. It's like, dude, there's 300,000 people in your town. Like, one cash practice literally couldn't even work with all the people that need their help if they wanted to. There's more work to go around than any one person, one clinic could provide. So don't let that scare you off, because the real problem is not other providers. The real problem is there's a lot of people out there that you can help that don't even know you exist or that their problem can be addressed. That's what we're really fighting against. That's marketing, and that's getting your brand out there. So small towns, sweet spot, mid-sized towns, big towns, they all work, but it's all going to come down to the same principles of, do you know how to sell? Do you know how to market? Do you know how to systemize your business? And can you hire people? Can you scale through people and become a good leader? If you can do those 4 things, you can have a business that's functional in pretty much any size town as far as these cash practices are concerned. So guys, thanks as always for watching this video. Let us know if you have any suggestions for other topics you'd like for us to address. And as always, go to physicaltherapybiz.com and check out what we have going on there if you're interested in getting some help starting or growing your cash practice. I'll see you next week.